Hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the lead faculty within our pelvic health division. In that division, we have two courses that we offer. We have our 8-week online pregnancy postpartum course, where we take you on a journey about how to help and support females in their pelvic health from preconception to the postpartum return to fitness. And then we have our 2-day live course where we talk about the internal assessment, teach the internal assessment, and then bridge that in to fitness. And so our first cohort for our online course starts the beginning of January. And if you're interested in finding out where we are for our live courses, I encourage you to go to the resources section on ptonice.com and sign up for our PPP on Ice newsletter, because we put a ton of research articles, but we also put all of our upcoming courses on that email. Okay, so today I wanted to start talking about, especially with the holidays, I think that people see their family and sometimes people talk about the things that they are struggling with. And we can sometimes get into bad advice central when it comes to recovery. And this was really front of mind because my husband and I have been watching Limitless by Chris Hemsworth that talks about the science of longevity and really a lot of the things that if you've been following ICE for any amount of time, we talk about all the time. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this in our Jerry division at some point because it's very applicable to that group as well. But when I was talking about this kind of docu-series by National Geographic with Chris Hemsworth, he was talking about things like sleep and stress management, memory, strength, and being somebody who is in kind of that new postpartum, that having little kids phase of life, I was kind of, I guess, laughing to myself about how sometimes putting in all of these protocols or things to optimize our recovery, especially when you're in the thick of it as a new mom or a new parent, can just be so difficult and sometimes a little bit disheartening. And so that got me thinking a lot about advice around recovery and how to help moms, and some of that advice like sleep when the baby sleeps and how unhelpful it was. And I remember when I was newly postpartum with both my son and my daughter, I had very different experiences. But if somebody told me to just sleep more, it was almost very triggering for me, especially as an athlete who took my sleep very seriously because I knew how much it impacted my recovery and my performance in the gym the next day. But I had these little tiny humans that were kind of dictating whether or not I slept or not. And so, it's well-meaning advice, but it wasn't exactly something that I could implement. And so if I was a healthcare provider saying that to my newly postpartum mom, or sleep when the baby sleeps when I have another kiddo who refuses to nap, that is not going to let me sleep, that can be very triggering for mom. And so I thought we would talk about some of these pillars of health and try and give some advice that moms can actually implement relatively easily. And recognize that this isn't going to be something that's all or nothing. And so the pillars are sleep, physical activity and exercise, nutrition, social support, and stress management. And so sleep we're going to talk about first because that's where we probably get the most advice. You should sleep train your kid then, or they're fine to just cry it out when you don't feel comfortable with that. And so the amount of physical time we spend asleep, sometimes we can't control that. Even as a parent who has a 16-month-old and a 3.5-year-old, sickness has been rolling around my household. My kids should be sleeping through the night, but there's plenty of times where I don't get a ton of sleep. But what are the things that are within my control? And so these are things around sleep hygiene. With our little ones, we often are trying to optimize the circumstances and environment at which they fall asleep so that they have a better chance of staying asleep or getting into deeper sleep, right? We will get blackout curtains. We will make sure the room is the right temperature. We will have a fan on or other white noise on. We will try and stay consistent with this schedule at which we are trying to fall asleep. All of those things are wonderful to help facilitate a infant or a preschooler or a toddler to be sleeping, but they're also really wonderful for us, right? These are things that we can be implementing alongside our little ones to try and get as much deep restorative sleep as possible within the windows that our baby is going to let us be sleeping. So while we are looking at blackout curtains for our little ones, putting blackout curtains in our room can be helpful. Having white noise that isn't loud enough that you can't hear the monitor, especially if mom is having some anxiety and fear that she's not going to be able to hear the monitor. But for me anyway, it was like instantly in tune. And I woke up immediately if I heard a little bit of a squawk coming from that monitor. Having a room that is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit and trying to fall asleep at a consistent time, if possible, each night. So if baby's going down at 7:30, 8 o'clock, if you can get down by 9 o'clock, then hopefully you have at least 3 to 4 hours of potentially restorative sleep, getting through a couple of cycles if possible, if baby lets you. But having the environment set up in a way that when you do get the opportunity to sleep, not saying just sleep more, you need 7 hours of sleep a night. It's like, thanks, but I can't help that. This way you can have some of that environmental change that is a little bit easier to implement. So that's number one. Physical activity. So when we have individuals who are active before and their time is just taken up so much more with the demands of motherhood or parenthood, it can be really hard to get back into a routine. And so the first thing I always talk to my clients about is that we used to have this idea of what exercise meant, right? We used to have this conception around, I get into the gym, I spend 60 to 90 minutes in the gym, and I have a really good workout and I leave. Well, that sometimes just isn't possible when you're a parent, especially in those early days. And we sometimes need to reframe that, especially early on, that this is a season in our life and physical activity and exercise can look different in this window. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe you just get a set of squats in when you had squats and accessories and conditioning. And then the next day you're trying to get it all in and baby naps for a little bit longer and you get your whole session in. Both of those sessions were successful because you were able to move your body in a way that your time allowed in that moment. And so working on trying to remove that all or nothing approach to exercise, especially in those early days, can be just so unbelievably helpful. When you have a baby that is colicky or very, very tough to put down, it can feel almost impossible. And when you do get baby to sleep, you have all of these other things like work and your house is a mess and you have other things, Christmas season, you have to buy Christmas presents, that the idea of carving some of that precious nap time away to exercise is just unrealistic. And so getting in body weight movements with baby can be another way to get movement snacks in your day where you are moving your body in a way that's going to make your body feel good. It may not look how you thought before, whether it was CrossFit or running or weightlifting, but it is something that is going to contribute to your fitness for the season that you are in. And then the last thing is to try and get outside. I know it's really, really tough in the winter months having young children, especially young infants. But baby wearing and getting them all bundled up and getting outside can be extremely helpful. For baby who is fussy, it can calm them right down. It calmed both my kids down almost immediately getting them outside. And the being surrounded by nature, it's usually in a concrete jungle, but getting outside in that impact of being outside on our mental health is extremely helpful. And so it's a way that we're connecting with baby. It's also going to be really great for us. And with respect to perinatal mood disorders, we know that as little as 15 minutes 3 times a week, which for some moms in the thick of it, that can feel like an insurmountable task to accumulate that. But even every minute counts to help manage anxiety and stress. So if you have a gym that, you can bring baby to and coaches can pick up baby, I was very fortunate to have that. It can be super wonderful. We had a gym also that had daycare for kids over 6 months old. That was also extremely helpful. But I know a lot of parents who say, I work all day. I just cannot justify spending an hour of the little time that I have with my infant exercising. And so that means that we're going to try to incorporate our babies into our movement. And that's totally okay. That's amazing, actually, because it's role modeling all of that fitness. So trying to reframe some of that physical activity. So that's number 2. Number 3 is nutrition. Many of our active individuals are used to controlling a lot of controllables when it comes to nutrition. And that can be really hard to maintain when we are early postpartum. When it comes to nutrition, the first thing that I prioritize with all of my clients is getting enough calories in, period. Right? If I have clients who are chronically under fueling, then I don't really care where your calories come from. I just need you to get them in. So if nothing else, it is just trying to hit your calories for the day. If financially you're able to do it, things like meal prep services like Trifecta, 2 and 2 meals. I know there's a ton of different local services can be extremely helpful in those early postpartum phases because you just throw it into the microwave and then you can eat while your baby is on you, if you're baby wearing, or as you're moving or navigating around your day. The idea of meal prepping in some of those early postpartum months, especially if you don't have a ton of support, can be extremely challenging. And so having those services, if financially you can do it, is wonderful. If not, drinking your calories is also okay. I've had plenty of times where my recommendation is to have a protein shake around in your water bottle with you all the time because sometimes it can be hard to have food with us, but we can have liquid calories with us. And so having a protein shake around with us to try and get the amount of calories that we need is going to be extremely important. And making sure that you're fueling not just for our day-to-day, but also if you are deciding to nurse, having enough calories in your day is going to be extremely important to make sure that your milk supply doesn't dip. And so those are kind of the 3 things that I will hit on. And if people are asking you what you would love to have or how they can support you, getting some of those things like meal trains and those prepackaged meals can be extremely helpful. So that's nutrition. So we've had sleep, physical activity, nutrition. The 4th one is social. So a lot of moms getting enough calories when breastfeeding. Absolutely, Sam. I know it's so tough. Moms can inadvertently get themselves into reds without meaning to. So social is an extremely important part. A lot of people feel like the early postpartum period is extremely lonely. They are with this newborn. They are trying to come to grips with what it means to be a mom. They have all of these things happening. Mood, anxiety might be high, and they don't know who to turn to. And it's an important thing to be talking about how isolating motherhood can be. It depends on what your social supports are. I know I had a very different experience postpartum with my daughter than my son. And with my son, we moved away to the US, which was an amazing decision for our family, but we moved away from all of our family. And so that support wasn't there. And we definitely noticed a difference when it came to how we were able to navigate challenges or what we were considering from a support perspective. And so try and find a group of moms, even if it's 1 or 2, who get it or who align with your philosophies and belief systems. There is a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but there's a lot of different ideologies when it comes to parenting. And it can be very stressful in some of these mom groups where people are arguing about the quote unquote right way. And it can cause more stress rather than more connection. And so finding those individuals that you can connect with, that you can express what you are stressing about without feeling judgment, can be extremely helpful. One of the first things that Nick and I did when we moved to the US, because we did not have that social support from our family, at least like in terms of proximity, was to find a CrossFit gym because we knew that we would be around like-minded individuals when it came to exercise and prioritizing exercise with our family. And so that is one way to try and make that early postpartum period feel a little bit less lonely. The other thing that I sometimes get my clients to do is do a detox from their social media accounts. We end up following a lot of mom accounts, and we see the highlight reels, and it can really be damaging to our mental health. And so if my client is kind of getting into these spirals where they are comparing to other moms who recovered faster or got their muscle up here, or like, oh my gosh, she's 4 weeks postpartum and she's already squatting 125. Like, all of those things are not helpful, and everybody's journey is going to be different. And it might be time to just mute them. You don't have to unfollow, but for the period of time that you're in, muting might be a good idea, because if it's not going to support your mental health, then it's taking away from it. And so if that is true, then it is time for us to just, for a brief period of time, mute those individuals, and then allow us to have our recovery and have our journey. And then when we might feel a little bit better, or when we have, maybe thought through, or maybe never, we can unmute those accounts. But it's definitely something that can help with our recovery, because that comparison can be really challenging. And it's often not true. Like, you see these filters, right? And they don't even look like people's faces. And people spend tons of time taking these cool bougie pictures of their kiddos, but that's what they spent their entire afternoon doing. So something to be thinking about. So that's kind of in the social space. And then the fifth one is stress. So it is really hard when you're kind of in the thick of it, that, one of the things that I recognize as being a parent, and I don't know if y'all agree with me, is that all of the things that you are working on as an individual gets magnified in parenthood. And so I always say that I never thought that the hardest part about being a parent would be emotionally regulating myself to a child who I shouldn't be expecting to have emotional regulation, because they're 1 or they're 3. And so when we're thinking about that, it can be tough when we are having these moments come up where our emotions are getting the better of us, when all of our expectations are coming to a head, where, the stress of Christmas is just very daunting. We need things in that moment to help us with stress. And, saying, well, just take a couple of hours to yourself is just, again, not very realistic for our postpartum parents who are in the thick of it. And so if you can have that social support that they can take baby for an hour or two, so you have some time on your own, that is wonderful. If you don't, but you do have time for a shower, one of the things that Limitless was talking about was this cold immersion protocol. And getting into a cold tub might not be, feasible in that early time, but taking the last 30 seconds of your shower and making it cool or cold, and controlling your breathing can be one way to start working on that stress response. And the other one that they mentioned in Limitless that I thought was really helpful for parents was to work on that box breathing. So inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and taking 30 seconds, stepping away from the stress, closing the door, and working on that breathing for 30 seconds to regroup when you're hitting this overstimulation can do wonders. And it takes practice, and it's definitely something that is hard to implement, but definitely something that we can actually put into practice very early in our postpartum journey. All right, let's bring this full circle. So sleep, work on the environment, because sleep more is not exactly feasible. So dark room, 60 to 67 degrees, same bedtime. When it comes to physical activity, it is not all or nothing. Try and get outside. Bring baby, have baby with you. If you don't want to be exercising away from baby or using precious nap time to exercise, movement is medicine. And even as little as 3 times a week of 15 minutes can help with mood disorders. And so this is in that movement snack versus those feasts. Nutrition, total calories first. Meal prep services if you can, and liquid calories if you can't. Getting that protein shake, bringing it around with you can be helpful. Social, find moms that get it, even if it's 1 or 2, use them and lean on them, have that support. And then it might be time to mute some of those individuals on social media just for the time being, in order for you to have a better mood. And then finally, stress, cold shower for 30 seconds, and box breathing, working on your own emotional regulation, because that is by far the hardest part of parenting. So I hope you all found that helpful. I'm getting longer again. But there's some advice, the recovery advice that moms can implement today that is not going to be, or that is in the realm of their control, I should say. What are other pieces of advice that you found helpful? Were there any other things that somebody told you that did not make you feel very triggered because it was outside of your control, but helped you get into a better routine? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I think this is my last time on the podcast before the holidays. So have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everyone. And I hope that you get to connect with friends and family. Have a great one.